Yesterday in Frankfurt's marketplace, I observed a scene that illuminated this question perfectly. A young man, perhaps 30 years of age, clearly educated by his bearing, stood near the fountain, speaking with unusual intensity to a small gathering of merchants and laborers. He spoke of the futility of their pursuits, the illusions that governed their days, the endless cycle of desire and disappointment that constituted what they called life. His words were not cruel but truthful, delivered with the clarity of one who has genuinely awakened to existence's nature. The crowd's response was instructive. They did not engage his arguments through reason or debate his philosophical positions. Instead, they grew angry viscerally, immediately angry, as if he had threatened their children or insulted their honor. Within minutes they had dispersed, muttering about madness and dangerous thinking. One elderly merchant spat as he passed. The young man was left alone, his isolation complete. I recognized in him what I have known in myself for decades. The awakened person does not merely hold different opinions from the masses. He represents an existential threat to their psychological survival. They depend on the very illusions he has seen through, and his presence reminds them, however unconsciously, that their comfortable edifice is built on nothing. This is why they must reject him, must declare him wrong or mad or dangerous. The alternative that he might be right is unthinkable. I observed two merchants in Frankfurt's marketplace. The first rushed about with passionate conviction, believing his wealth accumulated toward purpose. The second, recently awakened through the Upanishads, moved through identical motions, but with hollow detachment, seeing futility in every exchange. Which man was wiser? The masses would say the first. But wisdom and happiness are bitter enemies. The awakened merchant suffers more acutely precisely because he sees clearly, while the ignorant one finds comfort in delusions. Here is the paradox. Consciousness itself is not blessing, but curse. The stone does not suffer. The plant strives without awareness. Even the wounded dog suffers only in the present. But awakened man suffers in three tenses: past through memory, present through immediate torment, future through anxious anticipation. More terrible still, he suffers from knowing this suffering is not aberration, but the very nature of conscious existence. When drawn toward spiritual seeking, examine your motivation. Do you seek truth or comfort disguised as truth? If ordinary activities become difficult because you perceive their futility, you experience genuine awakening. This difficulty is clear sight, revealing what protective ignorance concealed. During my Berlin lectures, I watched my colleague teach with passionate conviction. Fully absorbed in his subject, I delivered identical content, but watched myself speaking, conscious of the performance, unable to forget that teacher and students were temporary manifestations of blind will. His absorption was comfortable. My awareness was torture. This is awakening's heaviest burden, the split between actor and observer, the inability to lose yourself in experience. The common man acts, the awakened person acts while watching himself act. Every gesture becomes heavy with irony when performed with full consciousness of its meaninglessness. You continue because the body's will demands it, not because you believe in the action's value. What you have sacrificed cannot be regained. The ability to be fully present, to act without perpetual internal division. When you observe yourself performing life's activities as if from outside, acknowledge this split honestly. Act because you must, not because you believe. This acceptance minimizes the secondary suffering from resistance to your condition. At my mother's salon in Weimar, I watched intellectuals debating, lovers courting, friends bonding. To them, these connections felt real. When I attempted to share this vision, I was met with offense and rejection. They preferred their dreams. Spiritual awakening produces not elevation, but profound isolation, Cassandra's curse of seeing truly while others dream. When you recognize individuation as illusion, you cannot maintain normal relationships. The common man loves and bonds believing in real separation. The awakened person knows all distinctions are Maya. Romantic love reveals itself as the will's reproductive trap. Yet a different relationship becomes available, mutual acknowledgement between awakened beings. This silent recognition is deeper than ordinary friendship, but rarer than diamonds. With the masses, maintain cordial distance, neither expecting understanding nor resenting its absence. Accept that you will walk alone, not as tragedy, but as necessary condition. This acceptance, paradoxically, reduces suffering. You structure your life to accommodate isolation, finding dignity in solitary truth. I observed a spider trap, a fly, then fall prey to a wasp which would be eaten by a bird. Each creature driven by insatiable hunger, each consuming the other endlessly. No purpose, no progress, merely the will feeding on itself eternally. At existence's core lies not God or reason, but blind, aimless, will unconscious, striving without goal. What can't call the thing in itself is recognizable as will. Every phenomenon expresses this blind force. Desire satisfied is merely temporary cessation before new desires arise. Existence is not neutral with occasional suffering added. Suffering is existence's fundamental nature. The will, by its nature, cannot be satisfied because it has no goal to achieve. Pleasure is merely pain's intermission. When you desire something, observe the desire's operation. Notice how achieving the goal produces momentary satisfaction, quickly replaced by new desires or fear of loss. This is not personal failing, but the will's nature. Stop seeking permanent satisfaction. It contradicts existence's essence. Simplify ruthlessly. Fewer desires mean less suffering. During my winter with Goethe, we debated color theory. I understood both Goethe and Newton were describing representations, phenomenal structures consciousness imposes on the will. Yet knowing this doesn't make the color disappear. The world as we experience it is representation, phenomena, structured by consciousness. The Hindu term Maya captures this. The world as experienced is veil obscuring the will, but recognizing Maya as illusion does not free you from it. The awakened person sees through the veil, yet remains bound by it. The principle of sufficient reason structures all representation into four forms: causality, logic, space, time, motivation. Eastern philosophies correctly identify Maya, but falsely promise liberation from it. The truth. While embodied consciousness persists, representation persists. You can see through Maya while remaining in Maya. When experiencing the world, practice double vision. See objects in their conventional reality while recognizing their representational character. This prevents both naive realism and impractical denial of embodiment. Walking through Frankfurt Zale, I saw one will manifested in countless temporary forms, each believing itself autonomous, each suffering in isolation while remaining metaphysically identical. The self you believe yourself to be is illusion. At the will's level, all boundaries dissolve. Individuation is phenomenal only. When boundaries between self and other dissolve, this is not mystical bliss, but psychological burden. All suffering becomes your own suffering. True ethics arise from seeing that harming another is harming oneself, because at the deepest level there is no other. The common man maintains relationships through belief in real separation. When you know all boundaries are illusory, normal intimacy becomes impossible. When encountering suffering, observe your reaction. If you feel compassion but still experience the sufferer as separate, individuation persists. If you feel the suffering as your own, the puncturing has begun. Act ethically from recognition that to increase suffering anywhere is to increase your own suffering. In my youth, I believed in my importance as a thinker who would revolutionize philosophy. This illusion shattered when my magnum opus was met with indifference first death. Then I believed humanity was progressing toward enlightenment. The revolutions of '48 destroyed this second death. Finally, I released even hope that suffering had cosmic purpose. Spiritual awakening is progressive descent through stages. First, personal illusions fall. Career ambitions, social pretensions reveal themselves as will's mechanical operations. Then social illusions, national glory, historical progress, all exposed as the blind will rearranging itself. Finally, cosmic illusions vanish. Divine purpose, meaning in nature, benevolent design, between stages, most seekers retreat, re-embracing comforting illusion. Learn to recognize your retreat mechanisms: absorption in work, religious faith, distraction through pleasure. The descent occurs in its own time. Attempting to accelerate it creates false enlightenment. At 43, fleeing Berlin's cholera epidemic to Frankfurt, I released the last hope that my philosophy would be recognized, that my suffering had purpose. The abyss opened. If nothing matters, why continue? But in that darkness, strange inversion occurred. If nothing matters, I am freed from the tyranny of mattering. This was not joy, but the rest of cessation rather than accomplishment. Hope is the will's ultimate defense, the belief that tomorrow will be better, that effort will be rewarded. But the truly awakened must let even hope be torn away. This is the most dangerous passage. Seeing that tomorrow will not be better, that suffering is not aberration, but the very nature of existence. Passing through requires accepting the question's unanswerable nature. When hope dies, a burden lifts. Despair is active suffering about meaninglessness. Resignation is acceptance of meaninglessness without suffering about it. Resignation is clear-sighted acknowledgement of what is, followed by continuation without false expectations. Each evening in Frankfurt, I attend the theater. When the orchestra begins, the world transforms. My perpetual self-observation ceases. My burden of consciousness lifts. For the music's duration, I exist neither desiring nor suffering. Why does music provide this relief uniquely? Visual art represents objects, literature represents ideas, but music expresses the will itself directly. It is immediate manifestation of existence's inner nature. This is why music moves us more. Deeply we recognize ourselves in it at a level preceding individuation. Not all art provides transcendence. Much is mere entertainment. True art demands absorbed contemplation. Understand clearly. This is temporary respite, not permanent liberation. When aesthetic experience ends, ordinary consciousness returns. Structure your life to include regular aesthetic experiences, not as social activities, but as necessary respite from consciousness's burden. These moments are not luxury, but necessity for awakened existence. My Frankfurt existence: modest rooms, few possessions, meals at the same hour daily, invariable walks. To observers, this appears eccentric. I know it as hard-won wisdom. Every variable eliminated is suffering prevented. Every possession is chain. Every variable is opportunity for suffering. Every broken routine is disruption of minimal equilibrium. Reduce possessions to minimum necessary. Routine is not prison, but protection. When daily activities follow predictable pattern, consciousness is freed from constant decision-making. Each desire satisfied creates temporary pleasure, followed by new desire or fear of loss. Reduced desires you attempt to satisfy through clear-sighted recognition of their futility. Rather than dispersing energy across multiple pursuits, concentrate on one or two essential activities. Examine your life for unnecessary complexity. Begin simplification gradually. Release one possession weekly. Decline one unnecessary engagement monthly. Establish one new routine quarterly. Walking Frankfurt streets, I encounter a beggar and feel my body's resistance to giving alongside metaphysical recognition that his suffering and mine are not separate. I give not from sentiment, but from acknowledgement that at the will's level, we are identical. True ethics arise from metaphysical recognition, because individuation is illusion. Harming another is harming yourself. Traditional morality requires belief in divine command or social good. When these illusions fall away, what remains? Recognition that all beings are manifestations of one will. Animals suffer, they too are will's manifestations. Therefore, Gentleness with animals is recognition of identity. Pity maintains distance. Compassion recognizes identity. Ethical action rooted in recognition doesn't depend on results. You act to minimize suffering because increasing suffering anywhere increases it everywhere. For decades, I wrote in obscurity, my major work selling fewer than 100 copies. Why continue? Not from hope, but because this is how my organism expresses the will through philosophical articulation. I knew that eventually a few awakened souls would find recognition in these truths. Here lies the paradox. The more one knows, the more one suffers. Yet the will to know cannot be abandoned by one whose organism is constituted for thinking. I am trapped, knowing that knowledge increases suffering, yet unable to cease seeking knowledge. Understanding increases suffering by stripping away protective illusions, yet seeking understanding is unavoidable for certain constitutions. I write not to improve the world, but because my organism expresses itself thus. Most who read philosophy do so as entertainment. A very few genuinely awaken and need guidance. For them, philosophical work provides recognition they are not uniquely pathological. For awakened consciousness, intellectual work occupies awareness productively, preventing descent into pure despair. Consider my poodle, Atma. When satisfied, he rests contentedly. He does not suffer from memory or anticipation. His suffering is pure and immediate. I suffer not only present hunger, but memory of past deprivation, anxiety about future scarcity, philosophical horror at the will's endless cycle. Which of us suffers more? The answer reveals consciousness as curse, not crown. Mechanical striving, animal immediate suffering, man suffering across time and meaning. Each level adds new torment. Through human consciousness, the blind will has produced organ capable of recognizing the will. This serves no purpose but represents existence's deepest irony nature, creating mirror to reflect its own meaninglessness. All human culture, religion, philosophy, art, science can be understood as elaborate mechanisms for not seeing what awakened consciousness sees. When feeling the burden of consciousness, remember, this burden is not personal failing, but species-level condition. Late in life, when recognition came, I felt neither vindication nor pleasure, but I felt satisfaction that I had not compromised, had not offered false consolation, had not betrayed truth for popularity. I offer no salvation, no escape from suffering, no transcendent meaning. What I offer instead is truth, the only real thing in a world of illusions and the peculiar dignity that comes from facing truth without flinching. Awakening does not make you happier, does not provide meaning, does not escape suffering. Be clear about these limitations. What can be claimed? Awakening provides accurate view of reality. It aligns your understanding with what is. It produces the dignity of one who has seen and not fled. Does awakening justify itself? No, nothing justifies itself ultimately. But for consciousness constituted to seek truth regardless of cost, awakening is inevitable. The question is not, should I awaken, but what do I do now that I have? Answer, align speech and action with clear sight. I am now in my 7th decade. Each morning I rise knowing nothing has changed fundamentally. The will remains, suffering continues. Meaning does not exist, yet I continue. I take my breakfast, I walk along the Rhine, I work at my philosophy, I attend the theater, I feed my poodle. Internally, every action occurs with full consciousness of its ultimate meaninglessness, I. Continue not from hope, but from simple fact that while consciousness persists, it must occupy itself. The masses continue through hope for improvement. You continue through acceptance of non-improvement. Return to practical frameworks. Simplified life, routine structure, aesthetic respites, ethical action, intellectual occupation. These are management strategies for bearable existence. I have not achieved the saint's perfect denial of will. I still feel desire, still suffer. but I have achieved clear sight without self-deception, continuation without false hope. I have not counseled suicide, because suicide is itself affirmation of will. Death is dissolution of individual consciousness, return of this configuration of will to the universal will. It is neither reward nor punishment, simply cessation of this particular embodiment. I have shown you what I have seen. I promise you nothing, no salvation, no escape, no ultimate meaning, but I have given you truth, and for certain. Constitutions. Truth is sufficient foundation for whatever existence remains. Continue if you can. The world is will, and the world is suffering, and you are that world. This knowledge costs everything, but provides something no comfortable lie can offer: alignment with what actually is. This is the risk of being spiritually awake, and it is the only path available to consciousness that can no longer dream.